What it do, YouTube? Back with another video, man. And today we're gonna be talking about something a little bit controversial, man. And if you can tell by the background, it's gonna be Hunter x Hunter, and more specifically, we're gonna be talking about Gon. And if you're not really in the know-how of like the manga space, Hunter x Hunter's came back for the umpteenth time to release a couple chapters. And in the latest chapter that's got dropped recently, we get our first sighting of Gon and Killua in like the past, I think it was like 10 to 12 years for the first time they're showing back up on camera, on panel. So it's kind of crazy. But me seeing this, especially specifically seeing Gon, like it brought out in me like one of the main gripes I had about Hunter x Hunter. I mean, I have other gripes about Hunter x Hunter as well. But if you look on the channel where I rate anime that I've seen and watched, read, etc., Hunter x Hunter is definitely not where you would think most people would have it. Most people really kind of glaze this anime a lot. Me personally, it's a good anime, but it's definitely not like the GOAT. And if I was judging Togashi, like out of like which work I prefer better, I prefer his Yu Yu Hakusho over Hunter x Hunter. I do agree that Hunter x Hunter is a more complex anime than Yu Yu Hakusho, but from an entertainment standpoint, I enjoyed Hunter x Hunter. I mean, Yu Yu Hakusho way more. So, but to get into the controversial bit of why I got kind of not triggered, but it just like made me remember like this is one of the big issues I had with Hunter x Hunter, and it's kind of seeped into JJK. It's just a minor JJK spoiler. Nen contracts. Nen contracts, which in JJK they have binding vows. So that's kind of where that originated from. I'm sure there's probably some other anime that's been influenced by it as well that I can't think of right now. But Nen contracts. The first time I heard about them and read them, it's just like it didn't sit right with me. It didn't make. I mean, it made sense, but it didn't make sense. It was like one of the slippery slopes. You know how like when they talk about time like travel in animes or in fiction in general, you're like, damn, people can fuck that shit up a lot. You know what I'm saying? But when it came to that's kind of the way I took it with the Nen contract is like you kind of have a get out of jail free card, right? The author, and it's smart on the author's way because like you can put them in certain situations and you can have the Nen contract or in this or another case binding vow to break you out of the situation that they're in, whereas otherwise you would have to do something else. So it's kind of like a good catch, right? And now here's the thing: a lot of people will argue it was like, "Oh man, there's major drawbacks. There's major drawbacks." There are drawbacks. However, on certain cases, like we see with both in Hunter x Hunter and JJK, sometimes those drawbacks end up not really mattering much, and you kind of think to yourself like, "Did we really need to have like, was this really just a plot device just to make the character get out of X situation?" And so I'm rambling on a little bit about that. But my main issue is with Gon and his Nen contract that he had to kill Pitou at the end of the Chimera Ants arc. And we see right here, obviously, this is like when he becomes an adult. He basically just gives up. He gives up all of his. Well, I should say we are seeing a character guessing what Gon did, because here goes into the first issue that I have is we never actually see an inner monologue of what Gon is actually doing. And granted, yes, we see him saying, "I don't care anymore. I don't care what happens to me, blah, blah, blah." But that's kind of just him, just like, he's just it sounds like he's just ranting to himself, you know what I'm saying? Like, and it also sounds like he's revving himself up to like go to a death battle, so he doesn't really care. But from my point of view, I would have preferred much more of like an actual inner monologue of thinking to themselves, like of Gon actually talking to himself, and you know, there being some visual representation of this Nen contract that he makes with himself. Because when we see Kurapika do it, it's a lot more intense, and it's a lot more obvious in our face that this guy's making this Nen contract, right? But with Gon, it was kind of like he was raging, and then boom, he just goes Nen contract, and it's just like, and now he's supposedly gave up all his potential, for this little bit of power for this little short moment. Okay. That's my first issue with it. The second issue is what follows suit. He supposedly should never be able to use Nen again. Now, obviously, he's saved, by the whole fucking genie wishing thing. He's saved by that. Killua, gets his sister to save him and whatnot. But at the end, Ging, his dad, tells him, oh, you just have to go back to the basics. You can learn Nen again. And obviously, like after that point, we don't see Gon. And like I said, this recent chapter is the first time I've seen him in 10 to 12 years. So here's where we have a potential dilemma. Are they going to show in these next chapters, are they going to show Gon back in the spotlight and he now has his Nen back? Because if he did, then what the hell was the point of the entire, Nen contract? Like, where was the tension really at in that? I mean, obviously there was tension because he almost died, but it wasn't like the tension that actually needed to be for the consequence of the Nen contract, right? Because like we have with Karapi, it puts into the perspective. Okay, well if Karapi could just breaks his Nen contract, maybe he actually won't die. You know what I'm saying? It just puts a slippery slope that I don't really like, and I feel like it's just a lazy like attempt for the author to just like have like a get out of jail free card. And I'm not going to go too deep on JJK, but we've seen it with Sukuna in the Sukuna battle at the very end of the series in the manga. Not going to go too much into spoilers, but we saw binding vows thrown out a lot, and some of them had merit. Some of them were just like, okay, what? At one point, I remember reading a joke. It was like, oh, Sukuna can get out of this dire situation. All he has to give up is being able to take a poop at two in the morning on a Tuesday. Just like that's basically what it started to read like. And granted, Hunter x Hunter hasn't got to that point, but it's just like it's that track. It's just that slippery slope that you can go down, and this is like one of the issues that I have. So I mainly just want to get this out here and see if there's anybody else that feels the same, and be like, or even thought, or hasn't even thought about it like that before. But yeah, I do think the moment I saw Ging's tell Gon that, hey, you can use Nen, you just got to go back to the basics, or you might be able to use Nen, and you just got to go back to the basics, start over. At that point, I was kind of annoyed because I'm like, what do you mean he might be able to use Nen? That's not fair. He should not be using Nen. He should not be using it. That would defeat the whole purpose of his sacrifice. So, and it just maybe if Nen contracts didn't already rub me wrong the moment they were introduced, I wouldn't care as much. But I just don't like what it did, and it eventually affected another series that I enjoyed, which was JJK. So, but all in all, man, let me know what y'all think, man. Maybe am I tripping? I got a point, or maybe like you want to enlighten me in the comments and let me know that, hey, nah, it really ain't that big a deal because XYZ, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, talk to y'all later. Peace.